Hello, and welcome to
Hello.
Really with Tom and Dave. How
Hello,
are you,
Dave.
Tom? How are you doing? Is your house above water?
We are still above water, just a block away from
Mhm.
each other, actually, which is
Well, I'm a
funny.
little farther now because
Oh, wait.
I'm at the
Where?
new place out in Sherman Oaks
Oh, okay. All right.
downstairs. So
Well,
I'm a
so I
little
can
further.
canoe. I can canoe to you,
Yeah, yeah.
if
And of
necessary.
course, we're setting the podcast in the time. So this is people in LA will know that this was during the monsoons
Mm-hmm.
that we
Yes.
were recording this because it'll be
As we have become the Philippines,
forget how many
apparently,
weeks.
in terms of weather, tropical
Yeah,
weather, which
yeah.
is I don't mind it. I mean,
Well, I keep saying, like, the trouble is I guess in the Pacific they're called typhoons, aren't they? Not hurricanes, or are they called hurricanes? Or
I think typhoons
yeah,
are the hurricanes on the other side of the world.
so they are, and they are gradually moving up the west coast. Like Mexico's getting them now. So in a few
Mhm.
years, we'll get them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's climate change for you,
yeah.
whatever it's doing. I mean, I
Way to
prefer this to
yeah,
burning down the state. I mean, we
yeah,
had several years in a row of fire weather,
yeah.
which is
Well,
not
yeah.
nearly as fun as like winter weather. Like snow is far more enjoyable than when it's raining fire and
Yeah.
and like the 405 is burning down. So I'll take water over
Hmm.
fire and snow over fire. Call me
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah.
But it seems to be at least an improvement, hydration wise. There's no more drought, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
It's,
I blame the dinosaurs.
they
You know,
polluted the ground with
Yeah, they
their
filled the
with
ground
their
with
bodies.
their rotting bodies,
Yeah, and
and
it's their
and
fault.
we're supposed to say, "Oh no, we're not going to burn it." No,
Hmm. Yeah,
that's not the
I
way
mean,
we
it's they
work.
left it.
No.
They left themselves here.
Now,
So, what else? So, what else is happening? You're what's going on with you? Let's get
uh,
a quick rundown because we have a cool guest, and I want to
we
get a
should
good
get to
Dave
that.
down. Do you want to get on to?
Nothing much going on with me. I'm just been ducking the rain and hanging with my dogs, and that's about it. And
Then let's fucking rock and roll,
uh,
because
and we okay.
what are you looking at?
I have a faulty light in here, so
Oh, I thought you had like a visitation.
no,
That would
I thought I
be
was having a stroke, but it's just a light that's
oh,
flickering.
well,
But we do
just
have
do
a
it
great
on air.
guest, a wonderful guest, and I'll let you do the intro.
Oh, let me do the honors.
Yeah.
Well, really, audience, Ernest Cline is an internationally best-selling novelist and screenwriter. He is the author of the novels Ready Player One and Armada, also Ready Player Two, and the co-screenwriter of the film adaptation of Ready Player One, directed by a young man named Steven Spielberg. His work has been published in 58 countries and has spent more than 100 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. He lives in Austin, Texas, where I believe he's joining us from now.
And also Ernie is also a lot of fun to hang out with in Austin if you ever get the chance. I recommend everyone who's ever read his book go to Austin and hang out with Ernie.
Oh, it's so kind of you to say. I have a book
No.
signing coming up. They could come hang out with me there. I'll be available to the public.
Yeah.
That is, well, listen, before we get into UFOs and UA, all that stuff,
Sure.
I just, as a fan, everybody's got to read Ready Player One. It's really just an imagination grenade. It takes my like childhood toy box and just dumped it out, and it's just a wonderful adventure,
Oh, so kind.
and also just a terrific, just kind of snapshot of the culture at the time. And I'm like, what? What inspired that? Where did it start? How did it start for you? What was the
Well,
what was the inspiration?
I was a huge nerd and given the same name as a popular Muppet on Sesame Street. So I had like that kind of defined my childhood, being a weird kid, an outcast, and obsessed with science fiction from an early age, from like around 5 when I saw Star Wars, and then 6 when I saw Close Encounters. Like science fiction became my obsession. So I think I always dreamt of. I was also a huge fan of science fiction novels and as well as films, and love Stephen King as well, and kind of always dreamt of being a novelist. And but dreamt of being a screenwriter even more once I found out that that was a job, making up stories for the movies. So, wow, you could do that for work. Go make my favorite thing ever. So that kind of became my obsession. I had a screenplay produced, and that experience was so crushing that it made me rethink whether or not I wanted to be a screenwriter. I've only made 2 movies, and I've had like the polar opposite, like traditional worst experience you could ever have, where the movie gets shelved and then taken away from the director and new stuff shot. Producers were Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein. It was like somebody designed.
Look at that twosome.
Wow. I know. Those were the producers of Fanboys, which started out was going to be my Clerks. I wrote it to be, I was really inspired by Rick Linklater and Robert Rodriguez and Kevin Smith, these guys who used the resources they had to make a small little movie. And Star Wars was a huge thing for me. And there had been no Star Wars for like 17 years between Return of the Jedi coming out in 1983 and then Episode 1, The Phantom Menace in 1999. And that made me want to tell that story. My mom had just passed away also, so I was kind of escaping into Star Wars and obsessing about this new Star Wars movie. I think it was the most anticipated movie in the history of cinema. I think it
had to be. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
You're going to have people lining up, even though they didn't need to line up. They lined up just for the communal experience of lining up to see a new Star Wars movie because they've been waiting 17 years. That was my tagline that I put on the script: is they've been waiting for 17 years. They're through waiting. Fanboys. And that's my first attempt to write a screenplay that could actually get produced with budget and in mind, and it ended up getting made. Eventually, it didn't get made. I wanted to try to make it back when it was set in 1998, before the new Star Wars movie came out, but it didn't get made until about 10 years later, and then it was kind of a period piece. But it ended up getting, through weird just timing, it ended up getting made with the permission of Lucasfilm. We got access to the entire library. We were allowed to use the Star Wars license in this little indie movie, and it's got Carrie Fisher in it, Billy D. Williams, Darth Maul, Ray Park, William Shatner. I'm actually in a scene in William Shatner. It was my first time being in a movie. I got to be an extra in my own movie, and I signed up to be one of the Star Trek nerd extras at this scene in Vegas with William Shatner, just so I could be on the set with William Shatner, who got paid to be for, I think, one day. That was the big day on the set that Shatner was there. But I'm in a scene with William Shatner so it was a bittersweet experience. But then once we shot that movie, it sat on the shelf for 2 years and it got tinkered with. And the version that got released theatrically is kind of compromised. And that was such a crushing experience that I was like, maybe I want to be a novelist instead of a screenwriter, where I don't need anybody else's permission or money to tell my story. And I could just tell my story directly to the audience and geek out as much as I want, drill down as deep into nerd culture as I want to go, and not have anybody tell me they don't get it or to cut it. So that's what I did. And the idea, I finally get around to answering your question about Ready Player One. But that's a good answer. That set the stage for writing Ready Player One. Yeah. And in the midst of all that happening, and this idea that I had that was the genesis of Ready Player One was, what if Willy Wonka had been a video game designer instead of a candy maker?
That's nice.
He held his golden ticket contest inside his greatest video game creation, which could be the coolest video game ever made. Like, if Willy Wonka was a game designer, what would and it would be the coolest. It would be the one video game to rule them all that contained every video game. And I had grown up reading Neuromancer and Snow Crash and loving cyberpunk science fiction, and also movies like Brainstorm. You guys ever see Brainstorm? Christopher Walken? Oh, yeah. So good. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And Strange Days is another great early
Lawnmower Man.
Yes. Oh, well, Lawnmower Man, I actually I enjoyed there's a director's cut of Lawnmower Man that's not too bad.
Oh yeah. I ushered Lawnmower Man. So.
Oh yeah. What about Lawnmower Man 2 starring Matt Frewer?
No, I didn't see that.
Right. Oh yeah.
We're going deep.
I was out of the ushering game by then. Yeah.
Anybody who wants to watch Lawnmower Man 2 can see Matt Frewer doing Max Headroom riffs. It's good. Yep. Good stuff. Anyway, so and that was the genesis of Ready Player One. I got that idea actually back in 2001, and worked on it off and on for 8 or 9 years. It wasn't until after my first kid was born that I was like, oh man, I really need to finish this book. And it was like I worked in computers and IT during all those years, which is a subject matter that's in the book. But I'd be in front of a computer all day and then have to go at home and make myself get back in front of a computer to spend more time writing and on the weekends. So it was slow going. And I wrote a bunch of screenplays, many of them not produced during that time as well. But then finally finished Ready Player One and sold it in 2010. And then everything you could ever want to happen to you when you write your first novel happened to me, to the point where I was like, okay, this is just the people running the simulation are not doing a good job.
Yeah, you're like, everybody, knock it off here. Knock it off, people.
No,
The wonderful
Ready Player One has become what like when I was a young man, what 1984 was, as 1984 the year 1984 was approaching,
right?
Where it was the shorthand. People would say, if they want to talk about the surveillance state, they would just say, how close are we to 1984? Is 1984 really going to be like 1984? And that's like everything about the simulation and virtual reality. It's the question every journalist, the shorthand is always, how close are we to Ready Player One?
Yeah, which is not something when you write dystopian science fiction, you don't want that to come true like less than 10 years after you published the book. I had a timeline out to like 2045. There's a good chance I wouldn't be around to see if my vision had come true. But now it's all, in this past month actually has been the craziest of all, seeing them roll out the Apple Vision Pro, where they not only stole design elements, the blue stuff on the headset, that's like our poster, like Ty's face, and then stealing the shot. They flat out, for their launch video, they flat out stole a shot from Ready Player One of the 360 degree going around the headset and then logging into the Oasis. I heard through the grapevine from people who worked at that ad agency that was their intention, was to steal from Ready Player One. So
if it's intended, then it's an homage and not theft.
Right. It's true. But I think even the name Apple Vision Pro is intended to sound like Ready Player One. 2 syllables, 1 syllable. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it seems like they're intentionally trying to riff on this expectation that Steven created by making this movie. And the most popular filmmaker and one of the most popular science fiction filmmakers of all time makes a movie about virtual reality and the metaverse, then that automatically becomes the shorthand for how a lot of people imagine it. So I'm so blessed, and it's crazy. And it's the simulations.
Yeah. And I think most people probably know Steven Spielberg best from Sugarland Express.
But he's made other movies.
Yeah. He has since then. A lot of people don't know that he went on from that.
Always? Anybody?
Always?
Yeah. Really cool. Yeah, about the afterlife.
Can you describe the feeling when he calls up and says, or does he call up and say, I'm going to direct your movie? I mean, what is that feeling? This is crazy.
It's the coolest ever. And when there was a time when I was on the set, I would wake up at a hotel, and I'm going to go to the set and hang out with Steven Spielberg while he makes my movie today. That was many days of my life where I got to have that experience and go around. They also shot a bunch of behind the scenes stuff with me, so I got to visit every department and geek out on everything. It was just it was like a dream come true. And then they premiered it here in Austin at South by Southwest, and the whole cast and crew and Steven all came to Austin. They built a big version of the set, like an interactive Ready Player One experience downtown here in my town, and then they premiered the movie here, and I got to drive my DeLorean down and hang out with Ben Mendelsohn at the premiere, and it was on my birthday.
Oh my God!
The movie came out on my birthday, just because Star Wars took our release date in December, so they bumped it, and they're like, "Well, we're gonna have to move it to March, and it's gonna be on March 29th." And I'm like, "Oh, so every poster of Ready Player One has my birthday on it at the bottom." It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah,
awesome.
I know.
It's great. Good for you. That's just fucking cool. That's just damn cool. And both those cars behind you drive?
They do. I drove this one. This one was the one that I bought when I sold Ready Player One. I'd always wanted to have a DeLorean, and I knew I was going to go on a book tour. I'm like, I could get a time machine from the 80s, which is kind of what my book is, and then drive, this iconic 80s time machine across the country on my book tour. So I drove that car all the way across the country. And then when the paperback came out, I had a contest where I gave away a DeLorean, and that was this other car. that I gave away to a guy who set the new world record in Joust. I did a contest with 3 different video game challenges where I to kind of recreate the story of the book when the paperback came out in the summer of 2012, and I gave away this car. But the guy who owned it for 5 or 6 years, he had like 4 kids. It's not a very practical car, 2-seater. He didn't have a place to store it. So he told me, he was still going to sell it. And I, since I had driven that car on my paperback tour, and it was the Ready Player One contest car, I decided to go ahead and buy it back and turn it into a Star Wars car. So these are my Days Lorians. My wife calls them the Days Lorians. And so I think they're gonna. I have 2 kids, so I think each kid's gonna get a DeLorean. I don't think I could ever get rid of them. This one now is becoming
one in R2 spot could hold 1 child.
Yes, is R2 still connected? The thing about this car was that it was already a Star Wars car before The Mandalorian came out, and then The Mandalorian came out, and I was like, I have to turn it into The Mandalorian DeLorean. So it's a work in progress.
Well, you know, if you
can we talk about UFOs? I've been dying to.
We're gonna blast off
do a UFO DeLorean. Well, if you get a 3rd DeLorean and you don't have a 3rd kid, feel free to adopt me.
Right? Okay.
Right.
Well, the Trey's DeLoreans. First thing, Dave.
All right.
For those listening at home and not watching us on our YouTube channel, Ernie has 2 really fucking cool DeLoreans in his garage here that we're looking at. In case everybody's like, "What the hell's going on?" With
and
the
one
cars?
One has R2-D2 in the back.
Yes, and speaking of UFOs, do we think Steven is read in on? What do we think there? Come on, honestly, what do we think?
You know, I think he's probably like Bryce Zabel. I think he, has had people. I think that there are intelligence agencies embedded in all the major media and in every single movie studio going back to the 50s. I really think that they've made a concerted effort, starting with The Day the Earth Stood Still onward, to use film to influence public opinion and maybe brace people because different think tanks have told them, hey, you need to be worried about this. This is a game changer. So I think I'm fascinated with that. I'm fascinated with being such a cinephile. I love tracing the history of UFOs in cinema and how them and aliens and interdimensional beings, and how I have a whole actually stack of movies that I brought in case you guys want to talk movies that have, I think, accidental truth hidden in them. One of them being The Day the Earth Stood Still. They're actually leaked CIA documents that where I think a Reagan briefing document where they're briefing Ronald Reagan, which if you guys haven't read that, it's like Ronald Reagan at Camp David. I talked with Christopher Mellon about this document, and he read it, and he said, I've been in a lot of meetings like that, and to me it read like the real thing. Yeah. It's a bunch of guys at Camp David. Oh, it's really, I have a copy I will send to you, gentlemen. But everyone is able to find it. I think it was maybe leaked to Linda Moulton Howe. But it's really great reading. If it's fake, it's some of the best writing of Ronald Reagan I've ever seen. And and there's just all these pauses while they check everybody's security clearances every time they change the subject. But it was, I think, somebody within one of the classified black programs briefing Ronald Reagan. They decided to let the Gipper in on the. So I think they let the Gipper in, but I don't know if they let Steven in. I think he, I don't know that he would want to know. I think he would maybe not want to get involved with it with the military. I know that the Air Force wrote him a letter when they found out he was developing Close Encounters that is in the Amblin archives. I never worked up the courage to ask to read it, but the Air Force sent him a letter asking him not to make Close Encounters and not to make a popular subject, not make UFOs a popular subject, because it would make their job of, because they weren't real, it would make their job harder. And I remember him saying, that is when I knew I was onto something. Like, they wouldn't have done this. They would come out of their way to like try to stop me from making this movie if I wasn't onto something. So that's how you get your confirmation, is like watching how they behave around a certain topic and whether or not they try to suppress it.
Yeah, well, he was getting advice, at least from Hynek and Jacques Vallée, though, right?
Yeah.
When
yes. And Jacques Vallée was on the set. there's I think in one of the Forbidden Science books, Jacques Vallée talks about his experience and him trying to tell Stephen that he believed they were more likely probably interdimensional and maybe not from some other planet. But Stephen's like, well, people expect aliens from another planet, and I'm trying to give people what they expect, not some surprise thing.
Yeah, you don't want to get esoteric with some, yeah.
It's true. But
I love that Jacques Vallée was thinking that even back in the 70s, he was kind of that feels like that's become a more, recent kind of popular notion but it isn't. It's obviously 40, 50 years, it goes back.
Yeah.
This idea that we are not dealing with something that's taken a long trip on a spaceship to come, fuck up a few cows and then head on back. This is something a little closer to home.
I think it's probably beings from another dimension, and also beings coming. They've been tracking these things ever since the Russians had satellites and radar in space. We see these things come from deep space, zooming down to Earth, and then zooming back out. And as soon as we had radar, we were seeing them all the time too. Some of them appear and disappear, like they're coming from another dimension. But
yeah,
I think they could be coming from other planets, from other dimensions, from everywhere, all at once. Time travelers as well. Like it could be this crazy Men in Black thing where you're dealing with like several different overlapping phenomenon, or it's just all a simulation and there's a puppet master like running SimCity 9000 and just, let's fuck with them this way to see what happens. Like it could be any number of things. But I tend to think, like looking at all the research I've done into the phenomenon with now accepting that Poltergeist, Stephen ghost directed Poltergeist. I don't know if you know this. It's credited to Toby Hooper, but Stephen was the one directing the actors. And
I didn't know that. Again, another movie I ushered.
Poltergeist was a traumatizing film for a little kid with scary trees outside your window. Holy crap!
Fucking clown under the bed.
Yeah. But I've heard people say he's even more on the money in Poltergeist based on factual stuff than Close Encounters, which was based on a bunch of all factual sightings. Yeah.
I thought about that.
Because that's the weird thing is how much overlap there is between all of these phenomena.
Right. And, you guys, I realize you guys must be so excited to have an actual Sasquatch cryptid on your show for the first time.
With luxurious beard and hair. You look funny.
Right? It's like the moment to do that film. Yeah. I don't realize how unruly my beard has gotten until I get on in front of a laptop. But
it looks very soft. That's
I just got a water softener, so maybe that's it.
Looking good.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I guess we were talking about the films, because you talked about like there were programs to try and direct culture. I guess one of the things we talked about is the Robertson panel. One set up by the CIA.
So you guys know Donald Kehoe, super badass. Yeah. Kehoe is like the proto George Knapp. Like I have such respect for Donald Kehoe. I call it, if you have the balls to stand up to the military-industrial complex, that's having solid brass Kehones. Like that's what I call it. Like if you have Kehones, then you're like at the level of Major Donald Kehoe, who had written a book called "The Flying Saucers Are Real," where it called out the Air Force and said they're lying to you, treating them like children. The truth is, they think these vehicles are interplanetary, and they're gaslighting you. Like the first guy to stand up and say that and publish books about that. And Hollywood, so they used Hollywood to discredit Donald Kehoe. Not only did they cut him off when he was on with Mike Wallace one night, but he also had written The Flying Saucers Are Real, and I think another book called Flying Saucers from Outer Space. And they optioned that book from him, making him think they were going to make a documentary, and then they turned it into Earth versus the Flying Saucers with Ray Harryhausen, awesome. Mars Attacks riffs on Earth versus the Flying Saucers a lot, with the flying saucer smashing into the Washington Monument is a steal from Earth versus the Flying Saucers is great. But it was partly, I think, funded by a government effort to discredit Donald Kehoe because they made a science fiction film out of his nonfiction book. And he tried to have his name removed from it unsuccessfly. So that's another Hollywood film, I think, that has its ties to helping cover up and discredit the UFO phenomenon. And one of the biggest, that and War of the Worlds, which Stephen remade, but the original George Powell version came out. Just that's what's fascinating to me is The Day the Earth Stood Still is 4 years. What is that? 5 years after Roswell, and there's also The Thing from Another World, the Howard Hawks.
Yes,
it's remade by John Carpenter.
Yes,
so that's like 4 years after Roswell.
And those are two major A-list directors, Robert Wise and Howard Hawks.
Guys who had made propaganda films during World War II and had intelligence ties. Yeah. And hey, like the kind of guys you could nudge and say, "Hey, do a favor for the U.S. Navy." You know, post World War II, I think they would have been on board. Or you could just throw money. All you have to do to get a movie made is find a script, make the script, and throw money at it, and it'll get made. You know, especially in the 1950s. So The Thing from Another World is like 4 years after Roswell, and it's got a crashed flying saucer in the ice. I was just watching it the other night because I hadn't seen it in many years, and it's crazy. They actually get we found a flying saucer. We finally got one, is what they say when they find it in the ice. They all line up on the edge of it to see what the shape is, and they're all standing in a circle. I'm like, we finally got one. We found a flying saucer. This is like 4 years after Air Force says in the press that they found one.
Yeah, so that was their original press release, pretty much. Yeah, we finally got one.
Yeah, we found one. Yeah. And then, whoops, they were getting calls from everywhere. You know, people in Roswell had at the radio station and in the phone switching office, they had, even in 1947, they had the ability to cut in on radio broadcasts and on telephone conversations. Like, people had their telephone conversations out of Roswell interrupted and said, "You shouldn't be talking about this." Like,
oh wow, I didn't know that.
Isn't that crazy? And radio broadcasts. Yeah, pretty wild. Who knows what capabilities they've had throughout this whole phenomenon, and with their ability to. Well, it's like what you guys were talking with George about after he puts a call out to everybody in Las Vegas. You know, after Bob Lazar is like, "Hey, if you work up at Area 51, you know some stuff." Like immediately, George's phone at like a CBS affiliate in Las Vegas, like being tapped and monitored, everything that they say, like that paranoia that Steven built in E.T. Like whenever the bad guys are closing in E.T., it's always a shot of government guys like with scanners and metal detectors, like sweeping through the forest, and then they get closer to Elliot's house, and then eventually they're inside Elliot's house. There's like a scene where there's an extension cord that gets pulled taut against a chair on the wall because that's how deep into Elliot's house the government has gone. Is that the end of their extension cord? I think Steven, he did it in Close Encounters as well. Close Encounters and E.T., there's this theme of the government cover-up and the government coming in and taking over the situation and blocking it off and, defibing E.T. and not helping him and sampling his DNA, all of that.
As I was sobbing into my popcorn. Into my popcorn.
My wife never saw the end of E.T. because she was so upset. It's my dark secret. She never finished watching E.T. Her parents had to take her out. She was so upset when E.T. died. She didn't make it.
Yeah.
And then when I was trying to get her to rewatch it, she was timing it from the time that E.T. died to the time you find E.T. is back alive. It's a long. He plays that a long time, and she was maybe a little too young to see.
Kevin McDonald from Kids in the Hall and I, we were again movie ushers when E.T. was out. The two of us, and for the entire run of E.T., part of our job was parents would come out with crying kids, and we would and we would say. And we would basically say, if you want to leave your kid, you can leave your kids with us. It was a more innocent time.
What on earth were they thinking?
People would leave. People would leave their kids with us, and we'd get them Reese's Pieces.
Wow!
And the crying kids would sit with us, and the parents could go back in and watch the rest of the movie.
Wow! You should have been. I'm on the ET Blu-ray for the 40th anniversary, talking about my experience with ET. You should have been on there.
Oh, absolutely.
You tell the other side. I told them about my wife, but they did leave that story in. I think we don't want to talk about all the kids who are traumatized by ET. You know who else I think was probably insanely traumatized by ET? Your last guest, Whitley.
Oh, Whitley
Strieber. Like, can you imagine all the people who? There was a rash of people when Whitley's book came out with that picture of the gray alien. People freaking out in Walden books all across North America because they'd never seen a picture of this thing before. Gary Nolan was one of them. So I think, can you imagine then the biggest movie of all time comes out and it's a kid befriending this alien, bringing him into his bedroom, you know, like feeding him vegetables and playing Atari with him. like,
Yeah.
like, you can see why people would think if they were getting abducted or having stuff like that actually happen to them, you would see this movie and think, oh my God, they're trying to program us to love these things and think that they're, you know, along with Mac and me, just at the cherry, cherry on top of trying to program us to love these aliens. I don't know, but I think Steven, I think Steven was just following his own fascination with the subject as a storyteller and wanting to, popularize the subject, which he did.
I always marveled at the design of E.T. because it was not like a cuddly, it's not a cuddly design. I mean, the initial it takes you a minute to adjust to the sort of, the alien quality of the E.T. design. I mean, yes, he had big, warm, wet eyes that were, of course, very emotional, but that design was weird. It was
you want to see even creepier, that it was originally called Dark Skies. There was an earlier version of E.T. that was based on the Kecksburg incident, which is that family in Kecksburg, Oklahoma, wherever Kecksburg was, getting terrorized by little goblins and fighting them with shotguns for hours. A famous Kecksburg. So that was actually going to be the basis for what was E.T. And they did early designs. I think it was called Dark Skies. You could Google Dark Skies unproduced Steven Spielberg, and you'll see early designs of E.T. that is like a mean, angry E.T. And I think when they were actually working on E.T. 2, potential sequel, they were using some ideas from Dark Skies. But yeah, there was Steven, before he was doing E.T., he was developing a much darker horror movie about aliens attacking a family in the woods, which is, but I think he did enough of that in Close Encounters, man. When they're coming for Troy, the little boy, Gary, that has very poltergeist elements in it too. The abduction scene in Close Encounters where the grates are flying open and the screws are coming out and there's weird.
That's very scary.
Yeah. Very traumatizing, but riveting. I couldn't stop watching.
Yeah. And and I guess that's M. Night Shyamalan eventually made that other version of E.T.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this was a good. You guys ever see Invaders from Mars?
Oh yes, yes.
Oh, so this was remade also by Tobe Hooper. Directed a remake of this, but the original one I think was 1953. And the little boy, the actor who played the little boy in the original Invaders from Mars, he had a UAP sighting 5 or 6 years later after being in the movie,
really?
In his neighborhood. Yeah, I saw an interview with him when I was researching Invaders from Mars. But the original Invaders from Mars has been used by some people to try to discredit alien abductions because there's some elements of alien abductions happen later depicted in Invaders from Mars, like a needle in the back of the neck and people getting but I don't buy any of that. But I know it's fascinating the way both movies are after Close Encounters came out, they used Close Encounters as a way to discredit people. Like, oh, you saw Close Encounters, so now you thought you saw a flying saucer. Like you've been watching.
As opposed to Close Encounters being based on actual accounts.
It's true.
Chicken and egg thing. And it's also that weird thing with debunkers where if they can find any flimsy thing to tie to any element of a story, then they believe they've debunked the entire story. So it's like, they had needle in the neck. Well, there you go. That's what that couple in coming back from Montreal had.
Invaders from Mars. Let me tell you about an interesting connection between Close Encounters and Project Serpo. You guys ever heard of Project Serpo?
That rings a bell, but I don't know what it is.
So George told me all about it when it was first coming out. I think it was in the aughts, maybe the late 90s or the aughts. These documents started getting sent from anonymous accounts, possibly Richard Doty, to a bunch of UFO websites. And it was a whole bunch of documents describing a mission to another planet called Serpo, conducted in secret by the U.S. government with a list of all the supplies that they took and what their interaction with the people on the other planet. It's like a science fiction story, Project Serpo. And it stretched, and it shares a lot of elements with Close Encounters. People would point out this sounds a lot like Close Encounters. and the logic was, oh, Close Encounters, they embedded this story in Close Encounters because there's the people in red in Close Encounters who are waiting to go on the ship at the end.
Right.
Mhm.
The only Roy Neary's the only one I think that gets taken, but there are these other people preparing to
The team,
you see them
Yeah.
praying. I don't think they actually ever get to go. But that story of a group of ambassadors going to another planet was borrowed for this Project Serpo. And the crazy thing about Project Serpo is buried in all this science fiction bullshit is stuff about layered bismuth, magnesium, and titanium at the micron level, that metamaterials stuff.
Mhm.
It's in Hal Puthoff's research that we just found out a few years ago with Eric Davis, like the stuff that you shoot terahertz energy through it and it apparently floats. That stuff is mentioned in Project Serpo, this stuff that was leaked. And I asked Lou Elizondo and Hal Puthoff why this was. Like, why is this stuff about your research in the layered? And they both told me, well, like you caught us. Sometimes when people want something to come out, they'll bury it in the midst of a bunch of bullshit leak just to get it out there, so that if it does come out, then it's part of a whole bullshit story that no one will believe. So you bury the truth that you know is probably going to come out in a amount of bullshit. So when it does come out, it'll get traced to this mountain of bullshit and not to the truth.
And you can also use the bullshit to trace who's been propagating the story,
who is spreading it. Yes.
Yeah.
So once I found that out, that just all creeped me out. Like, just it's part of the mind games, right? That they've been playing with us, gaslighting us all this time, and like,
What was the documentary about Richard Doty called? I remember Mirage Men.
Mirage Men. Yeah. That was
for people that don't know, that's about the program to deliberately spread disinformation and discredit people or drive some people insane.
Or just one. That's just the one that people know about, Richard Doty. Like, and I think that he was Air Force intelligence, right? Doty.
Yeah.
But clearly the CIA had their own up to shenanigans, the FBI, and sometimes they're communicating and sometimes not. The different military branches are like fighting over whoever gets to the crashed UFO first is the one who gets to keep it. The Army gets one, the Navy gets one. It's so screwed up. They wouldn't even share amongst themselves before they eventually get squirreled away in aerospace companies. Wild stuff. You guys send me off on a tangent.
No, it's a good tangent, because I was going to ask, like, because we can sort of track this sort of, cultural suppression of the phenomenon in the sense of nothing to see here. This is your, fiction, all this stuff. And now we're in a place I'd characterize as kind of schizophrenic. I mean, I'm interested in what your feeling is, because you're not just an enthusiast. You've researched this deeply. You've talked with all these folks. In the tension we see in government, what are we seeing? What is your sense of what we're seeing publicly and what's going on behind the scenes privately? Is it slow disclosure happening in a purposeful fashion, or is this a disorganized, chaotic? What is your take on what's happening right now?
It seems to me like two different factions, and maybe the third faction now is the Congress, who's been alerted. But there's the old school faction is like, no, we need to keep this shit a secret as long as possible because we're all going to end up in Leavenworth. And the other is like, no, enough is enough, boomers. Like, this is finally going to come out whether you guys want it to come out, and we're going to make it come out whether you want it to or not. I think that's what's happening, but it boils down to like a few people like Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon. Christopher Mellon is like a unique, like super genius, smart guy who also has the family name and the his own history to know what's bullshit and what's not, and a like rock solid bullshit detector, and is the one guy in government just calling them on everything, every lie, like eloquently. I'm a big Chris Mellon fan.
Yeah,
he has a presence. I'm not going to lie.
Yes.
We met him briefly at Saul, and he does have this kind of aura of like, I'm like, oh, he's like an Illuminati guy or something, like he's definitely feel that. And I use that term in the general Illuminati sense, not in any sort of specific way. But but yeah, he's an interesting cat. Is he a gatekeeper? Has he had hands on a craft? Do we think?
I don't know, man. That's the thing. Like, if you get to have your hands on a craft, you never get to admit it or say it in public. Like,
Yeah.
like that's probably part of the deal. Like, they, you know, they threaten Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin's lives, then they'll threaten anybody's lives. They have to be somebody like almost untouchable, like Christopher Mellon. Like, if you messed with Christopher Mellon, people would notice, and he would make sure everyone in the world knew about it. And you can't, you just can't fuck with him.
He's also got Chris Mellon makes the that part of the world that keeps wanting to call everyone a grifter. You sort of go, well, I don't think Chris Mellon is in this for money.
Yeah, I know. I think he's grifting. I
think the Mellon fortune will do him just fine.
Oh, yeah, no, there are always going to be people who cry grifter because it's an easy out. Like,
it's the new catchphrase.
Like, I can't handle this. I don't want to believe it. I'm not going to believe it. I don't care what you say. You guys can go hang out with the non-human intelligence, but leave me out of it. I think that's the way like a lot of people feel. I got enough problems. Just the day-to-day of human existence is enough of an existential burden for me that I don't need to know that there are creatures smarter than us that are zipping around and not sharing their technology with us. Although that's what kills me is that evidence would indicate that they have been sharing their technology with us, but just not with the right people. They end up sharing it with our military, who ends up using it to make weapons and not giving us free energy, because that would erase the whole need for military contractors. If everybody had, free energy, and it would erase need and hunger, and it would also create Star Trek and launch humans out into space. That's, I think, the big the thing with free energy is it would both save us, but also unleash us on the rest of the universe. And who wants human beings showing up? Like, if you've got your shit together, like, which clearly these non-human intelligences have their shit more together than we do. Like, you wouldn't want humans showing up to your party with shotguns and a shitty attitude about everything. Like,
so the NHI are just going easy action.
Like, keep them there. Keep the monkeys on their little monkey planet in the nature preserve. Dave and I were discussing whether it was the farm lab zoo or but if zoo was the correct term, that maybe a nature preserve.
Yeah, I think because I believe it's a nature preserve. Because, as I said, in a zoo, they take care of you. Right. They feed you, they give you medicine, they make sure you aren't, they keep the predators and the prey apart. But in a game park, it's just the lions are eating the antelope, and if you get sick, you die. So I think,
and the farmland, and just for those at Farm Lab Zoo would be sort of the argument for why they're not telling us what's going on.
The reasons why you wouldn't want to. The reasons that if you got read in on this, and they're like, well, here's the deal. Here's why we're not telling everybody. Is because it'll scare the shit out of everyone, and no one's going to show up for work or anything ever again if they find out, that they're stuck in a farm, a lab, or a zoo, or some combination, fun combination.
Well, especially when there's the theory that what they're farming isn't even. It's not like they're farming us for meat, like in To Serve Man.
No.
That maybe we're just fleshy petri dishes for growing souls,
right?
And that our souls are a commodity of some sort.
That's what Robert Monroe from the Monroe Institute called it, was loosh. When he was having his out-of-body experiences and he encountered these other beings that they were farming us for loosh, which is like emotional energy. And that was Tom DeLonge's thing, too, in those God's Man and War books that he did with Peter Levenda. And they had a lot of that idea of ancient gods, like the Greek and Roman gods, were real, but they were aliens, and that they have been pitting humans against each other, manipulating us to get us to fight with each other, to create emotional energy and anger, and they feed on that.
And it's something Bob Lazar very reluctantly told George.
Yes, the thing about containers, humans being containers, but not the same.
Yeah, there's that great clip of George saying, "Come on, just say it."
I'm just saying, their
Bob
farming
gone, it's so weird, George. I don't want George. It's so weird. I don't want to. Yeah.
Right. And he didn't know. Bob admitted he didn't know whether or not it was just documents that he gave him to read to bring him
fake.
Up to speed, which is, I'm sure, part of the manipulation. Like, I want to know whose job that is. Who's the guy who prepares those documents, or writes up the Project Serpo story and like sneaks the truth in? Like, somebody, there's a writer. There are like screenwriters who work for the DIA and the DOE and the all those 3-letter monstrosities, like something like 36 different intelligence agencies that we have now, all not answering to each other.
Are you building to a confession, Ernie?
No, I'm just expressing my exasperation at the state of affairs. What you were saying, my reaction to all this is, I can't do my job. I'm a mainstream science fiction writer. Science fiction writer's job is to take the current technology and history and extrapolate into the future and think about how that technology is going to affect people's lives. And how do I do that if I don't know what the current state of technology is, and haven't been told for 50 years because it's all been hidden away in black projects in places like Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin, all of our good friends.
And the new place that Kirkpatrick was working.
Arrow.
Yeah. No. He's at what is it, Royal Oaks or something?
Royal Oaks or one of those.
Yeah, another military contractor.
I feel bad for all the science. He probably wanted it. He probably didn't, dreamed of being a real scientist. Like, sure, I'll work for the government, but I'll do science for the government. Like, I bet that guy never imagined he was going to be offered up as a sacrificial lamb and like some sort of hot sock puppet for Susan Go and the Air Force to keep towing the party line, pretend like David Grush is full of shit. Like, it's like Eddie Murphy and Beverly Hills, like, la, la, la. Dave Grush is talking, but I can't hear him. La, la, la.
Yeah.
That's Kirkpatrick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's on Kirkpatrick.
I mean, and I think there was actually, in terms of science, you had mentioned physics, you had mentioned energy. I don't know if you guys saw, there's Eric Weinstein. Yeah, Weinstein was on I think Chris Williams' podcast. Had a really couple interesting, because he was he's a mathematical physicist from Harvard. Like, I feel like, and he's beginning to really pivot. He had been kind of a debunker and a skeptic, and I on the one hand, I was kind of happy to see that, because I think we need more science allies in this game, in this conversation, because sort of Avi Loeb and Gary Nolan have been carrying a lot of fucking water for people that haven't had sort of the courage to come forward. And I think Eric, he's as in terms of a popular voice in science, who does know what he's talking about. It's interesting what he's saying, because he certainly is absolutely now convinced that these SAP programs exist, like these, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Yeah. That they exist. Now, he's not willing to say it's little green men or some ridiculously elaborate 40-year psyop to try to fool our enemies into, but he doesn't, I don't think he truly believes that. What he's talking about is that the scientists that are involved, it honestly seems like he's pitching himself for a gig, because he's saying dimensional, whatever, interdimensional. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. The only people that really know what they're talking about would be me and a couple other guys, where it's like, they mean well. They're really trying to get disclosure out, but what they need is a scientist, because if you want ultimate power, it's not money. It's not conquering land. It's physics. And this country has our country has abandoned physics. It sort of handed it over to the superstring folks who've got nothing to show for it after, a long time. And so I just thought what your thoughts were on that, on having do we need the scientists to step up, and is it our abandonment of physics?
I have such respect for Eric Weinstein. He has had the right reaction, like an initial incredulity, like, what? Like the title of your podcast. Like, really? Like, materials, physics, science, and knowledge has been hidden from the entire scientific community by defense contractors in the U.S. military, and their shitty stovepipe scientists who can't even talk to or collaborate with each other have been failing to figure out how to use it. Or worse, they did figure it out and they've just been using it, free energy, to power their TR-3B super weapons, and not letting the rest of the world have free energy while climate change spins out of control. Like, that's what I wonder now. Do do these idiots realize like, well, maybe if they have free energy, they could have that secret space force that Gary McKinnon, the British computer hacker, found. Maybe they already have spaceships in Star Trek, and they're just leaving us out of it, so they don't care if we all burn. But I hope that everybody at Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, all you folks know, you're stuck here on planet Earth with us, and planet Earth is dying. So if you have access to free energy and you're hiding it, like, now's the time to come forward with it. Like, we need to desalinate the oceans, pull carbon out of the atmosphere, and save the human race from an imminent demise and the collapse of our biosphere. If that's what kills me, if non-human intelligence has been gifting us this technology and it's just not been reaching us, it's been like suppressed by our idiot, selfish leaders to protect the petrodollar. It's upsetting to me, fellas.
Yeah, that would be a huge betrayal of humanity.
That's another reason you want to keep that a secret too. Oh, we betrayed all of humanity. Sorry, we're a defense contractor. It's like a corporation, or even like a bank. There's a great saying about like banks. A bank will do things that none of the people who work at the bank would ever do as an individual. But once they form this entity known as a bank and set it in motion, it's a machine that will, act like its own artificial intelligence, just like a corporation. In capitalism, you set it in motion, the corporation will do horrible things that no individual in the corporation would ever like. Oh no, that would be evil. But the corporation itself, and I think that's what's happened with our military-industrial complex. We set it in motion, and now it's this machine, and there are good people inside of it, the machine, that are like, this machine is fucked, and we need to stop this machine. And then there are other people who are like, no, I love the way this machine runs. I love having a secret that no one else knows. I love thinking that I'm one of the men in black, even though I'm some pencil pusher. Yeah.
Why is also the notion that the military industrial complex it becomes its own ecosystem where the fitness factors aren't about defense anymore. It's just about sustaining the investment in machines and weapons. So it's all the investment itself is the goal, and defense is just kind of the medium in which it exists.
Yes, but there's also a strong link between our military and whenever anybody, general or admiral or anybody retires from high up in the U.S. Air Force, they usually go right to a job in the board of Lockheed Martin. Or Raytheon or Northrop Grumman. And oftentimes their security clearance will go up after they retire. They're like read in on, the reverse engineering programs and the special access programs after they've retired from their official position in the military and become private citizens and don't have to answer to the government. Not that they do anyhow. Not that the Air Force answers to anyone.
I still lean towards the notion that they have been trying to figure this out for 80 years and failing. And the fear, and a lot of the fear and the secrecy comes from the fear that somebody else is going to figure it out first. That Russia's going to figure it out, or China's going to figure it out. Or Liechtenstein.
That's the thing. Somebody else clearly already has figured it out. That's the thing. Somebody beat us to the punch. Somebody else has this technology, and they're, so we're still worried about ourselves. That's what's crazy. We're still worried about like keeping the technology from different factions of our own species. When clearly we've got bigger fish to fry than each other. But humans.
Well, I don't know if you've been watching, because all of the Soul Foundation talks are being released now.
I haven't had a chance to watch any of them yet. Those guys frustrate the hell out of me. You guys were there.
Yeah, we were there. But one of the ones that I really was impressed by was Kevin Knuth. And he basically just looked at the data that we have and did the math and figured out what levels of energy are, if what we're seeing is accurate, then what are the energies that are required to create
Oh, for
these
the Nimitz, zipping
behaviors.
up from 10,000 feet. Yes, and it was like more than like 1,000 nuclear reactors or something.
Well, he said it's like the output of the entire United States nuclear power.
Yeah.
For that 1.78 for that 0.78 seconds of acceleration would require all of the nuclear power in America to power that one less than a second maneuver.
Oh, we can't have
and
that.
so we're going. So that's like for people who keep saying, "Oh, this is just a dark project." I think that's pretty good evidence it isn't, because we can't harness that kind of energy. And we can't. We're talking about craft. He did the math on the Japanese Airlines incident, that cargo ship where there was a giant aircraft carrier size UFO that kept darting around, and they calculated that it was traveling at something like 250,000 miles an hour in short spurts, And he said these are the minimum speeds, and these are the minimum energies, because they, he said we're just calculating what the minimum would be for this to occur.
Right. Meanwhile, our government's got a couple dozen of them hiding in hangars that they poke with a screwdriver every once in a while no one at any research institution can look at them. And our climate and ocean temperatures are spinning out of control. Like, what are these assholes doing?
And the Pentagon, like 20 years ago, the Pentagon did a threat assessment on global warming. They did a major threat assessment, basically predicting everything that's happening now.
ExxonMobil did one. Yeah, ExxonMobil did back in the 80s the same thing. Petroleum companies do. And then took their own steps to misinform the public and gaslight them into believing that it wasn't anything they needed to worry about.
Because British Petroleum changed their logo to a weird green flower.
Oh yeah,
everything's like fine now.
It's basically a sunflower. It's true. After it's wild times.
That's what we're talking about, though. I mean, we're talking about power at a level and a scale that is impossible to conceive of, which I think, along with, and I think you're correct, that there's a fear of, retribution. There's a fear of just being thrown in jail. There's a fear of people being accused. There's a litigation. God knows. I mean, there's a whole, but it's also this. They're looking at power at a scale and an energy that is beyond, it changes the entire.
It would change
everything. Changes literally everything. And so I think that just not to circle back to the Eric Weinstein thing, but the one other thing he said was that there was just this. He believed in the durability of secrets. I mean, he believed that it's not impossible to fathom that these secrets are kept. There's lots of secrets kept for a long time. I mean, it's the government's actually pretty good at keeping secrets. That might have been something I think, Dave, you said on previous podcast. They're good at it. They work really, really hard to figure out how to keep secrets. Now, obviously some shit is spilling out, but for the most part, people are in the dark. They remain in the dark, and the stakes are so high. Whether or not they think we can handle it, I'm not sure they give a shit versus I want this to be mine. I want this power. If we can crack it, it's ours. And that remains a sort of human instinct that overrides kind of everything. But that speech that Knuth gave was so, I don't know, there was something so kind of like nuts and bolts about it that was I was like, okay, all right, I'm seeing
the point here. The obvious, that's the technology we need to save us, and it exists. We have been seeing evidence of it, and our government has been suppressing evidence of its existence all around the world for 50, 60 years, and the worst 50, 60 years ever for our climate and us pumping carbon into the atmosphere. Alone, you're guilty of one of the biggest crimes in history. Like, just the damage already done by climate change. If that could have been prevented, if you guys figured out anti-gravity with T. Townsend Brown and Ken Shoulders, sometimes, and kept it a secret because you wanted to use it to make weapons and you didn't want it to affect the petrodollar, because the petrodollar is what lets you control the entire world economy, and got to keep burning the dinosaur juice until the very end. until like the
Yeah.
Dr. Seuss parable comes
And if
true.
if you're not burning the oil, then how do you justify the constant buildup of the military to go out and get the oil as
Right?
well?
Yeah,
And,
no, you can't.
A lot of money, and a lot of politicians thriving on that money.
Listen to these Hollywood liberals with their tree hugging philosophy, talking like they know the troubles of deep black program.
I know.
Runners, yeah. But
I know. It used to be just the right-wing crazies talking this way. Now it's
I went. One of my favorite epic UFO moments. I don't know if anybody knows about is I introduced Dave to Steve Justice and Jeremy Corbell. Well, not to Jeremy, but Jeremy and Dave. I introduced them both to Steve Justice in the mosh pit of a Blink-182 concert. Like made our way through the mosh pit over to Steve Justice because Tom was on stage and called him out, and Hal, and I'm like, oh, they're here. So we made my way over, and in the middle of a song, and I'm like, this is one of the greatest moments in UFO history. Here, I'm introducing.
Opened up a seam in reality, and just open.
And he
Hal was too far away to make it over to Hal.
And Steve Justice could be used as a radio tower. He's
a tall man.
Yeah. I think he was holding up some of the stage lighting.
He is a sweet man. And
for those at home, Steve Justice, give us an idea of what cascade of characters here that we're dealing with at this concert.
Well, Steve Justice, a former head of the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, that guy knows what's up. And also Hal Puthoff, ex-head of Project Stargate at Stanford Research Institute and the government's remote viewing program, working with Russell Targ and those guys. Hal, fascinating guy, also involved in energy research. You know what's fun to do is to get Jacques Vallée's Forbidden Science books and then go back into the index and just look at the entries related to Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis and Kit Green. They're all really fascinating. There's one in Jacques' latest book, Forbidden Science 5, where he talks about Hal Puthoff expressing to him that he's terrified because one of his friends involved in a free energy creation project had everybody in the lab killed. It's just a little aside that he mentions that Hal told this to him, but Jacques Vallée hides a lot of crazy little secrets in those Forbidden Science books. You can never pin him down on what he actually believes, but he relays a lot of crazy.
I've only read the first one so far. I got to go through the rest.
Really good. Invisible College is
that
really
4
good.
or 5 of them now? Is that 4?
It's book 5 just came out. Richard Dolan, who's one of my favorite ufologists and writers, a great historian on this subject. Have you guys met Richard?
I haven't met Richard.
He's like the coolest guy. I'm a big fan. He
co-author with Bryce on the After Disclosure.
After Disclosure, yes. I have Bryce's show. Have you guys seen Bryce's show, Dark Skies, that he did?
Yeah. I remember watching when it came out. I was trying desperately to find someone that's streaming it now, but I couldn't find it.
You can't.
I found the TV movie pilot for it.
Yes, you could get that. But why wouldn't they want this whole series available, Dave? You could get every episode of Teen Wolf and Head of the Class. It's shameful.
And it was while making that, the Bryce kept saying that we talk about the Robertson panel and the idea of a liaising with the entertainment community, that he said these weird guys who were
Air Force guys
from the Air Force guys kept coming to him with story ideas or criticizing his scripts. They would somehow get hold of the scripts. Yeah. Before table reads.
There's a great book that Bryce wrote the foreword to called Silver Screen Saucers. And it's like an analysis of the whole history of flying saucers and the UFO phenomenon as depicted in movies and television. And it talks about Bryce's experience, but that happening on so many other films and television shows back in the 50s were tinkered with by the Air Force, tinkered with by the CIA, and they would edit news broadcasts with certain people, or always make sure to have Philip Plass on as a guest with, if Donald Kehoe was going to be on, have somebody there to like Bill Nye to like calm everybody down and be like, no, well, it could just be, lights in the sky, or even Carl Sagan would do that. Just calm people down.
Yeah. And now it's Mick West.
Now it's Mick West and Stephen Greenstreet. These jokers. They're not. You guys aren't living up. Philip Klass was much more imposing and harder to out. Couldn't really figure out that guy was working for the government until after he died, and like analyzing but he clearly was a spook. And those guys like what's what kills me. Like when you become an astronaut and you go to work for NASA, are there certain jobs where when you get your security clearance, that just means, okay, now you have to lie. Like if you see anything in space when you're on the space shuttle, you need to lie and keep your mouth shut. Yeah, there's aliens. We see them sometimes. Mum's the word. Like, what a shitty day at astronaut school when you find out, like, oh, it's all a lie. NASA's all a lie. I have friends who are astronauts, so I shouldn't be talking this way. Very sweet people.
I got to meet most of the Apollo guys when I was doing.
You were an astronaut, Dave.
Yes, I went to the moon. I was the fourth man on the moon. I was
fourth. I got to go tour. I have my friend Kjell Lindgren has gone up to the International Space Station twice. He called me from the International Space Station once. My phone rang and he said, "Hey, this is Kjell calling you from space." That was the craziest thing.
That is wild. Yeah.
Did he see anything?
He wouldn't be able to tell me. Like, that's the thing. If you want to get to go to space, like, put your hand on the Bible and swear to keep your mouth shut. I
wonder if that's why, because what is I'm blanking on his name, Edgar
Mitchell.
Oh, Mitchell. Thank you. Because Edgar Mitchell would make it clear that he had never seen anything.
Yeah.
Although he would work towards disclosure, and he would work to make the subject more, acceptable. So I wonder if maybe he had seen stuff, but it's that same thing that you have to lie. So he had to. Yeah.
Stephen Greer said that Neil Armstrong said to him and his wife directly, and Buzz Aldrin's sister also said that they both had their lives threatened, and that they and their wives and their kids would die in a horrible accident if they opened their mouths about what they saw on the moon. And they, those guys, if you watch their first hearing after they get back to the moon, they look like they've just been chewed out and had their lives threatened, and like they're not the fun, like Air Force plane jet jockeys that they were before they went up there. And they just pulled off the craziest Hail Mary of all time, made it to the moon and back with 1960s technology and like a calculator.
Yeah, like a Casio watch got the
pencil. Pencil.
Right, like, can you believe we pulled that shit off? Like, instead they're like, dealers in headlights, like, get me away from these cameras as quickly as possible so I can re-enter private life and then spend the rest of it keeping my mouth shut. With all the flying saucers parked all around Tranquility Base when we landed, telling us to get the fuck out.
Well, now that you mentioned that, there was a weird coincidence. I was seated next to Buzz Aldrin on a flight from New York to Los Angeles.
Wow!
And it was the day Neil Armstrong died.
Oh, what? Wow!
Yeah, and so I chatted with Buzz for the entire flight. But it was one of the things that Buzz said on that flight that I thought was really weird. He just, I said, "I'm so sorry about your colleague Neil's passing. That's sad." And Buzz just goes, "Yeah, there's something not right about that. There's no reason Neil should have died. No reason." And he's going on about something not right about it, something funny about that.
Oh, yeah.
And I also said I knew Pete Conrad and Al Bean and Dick Gordon from Apollo 12. And so we talking about that. And Pete Conrad had died just a little while before that in a motorcycle accident. And he said, and so he goes, the same thing about Pete. That's something weird. Something weird happened there. I don't get it. Something weird happened.
Man.
And I was at the time, this all seems kind of, I kept going, well, Neil was old, Buzz.
Whoa. How many guys are there, though, that if they said something, they saw something, like at this age, like I'm an old man now, they threatened my life, but this is what happened. Like Neil and Buzz, like either those guys had done it, like everyone would have believed it. There would have been no putting the toothpaste back in that tube. Remember that one time that Buzz tweeted something crazy of a pyramid in Alaska, saying it is pure evil itself?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I heard that.
He tweeted.
What?
I don't know what the story is. Buzz Aldrin tweet about a pyramid saying it's pure evil, and then he deleted it, and then there was ever any explanation.
Buzz went Lovecraft on us. I'm looking this up.
Who knows? But I'm sure there's, it's going to be so hard. Neil Armstrong, like one of the last speeches he ever gave, he said something to the effect of, he made some allusion to there are great discoveries waiting to be made for those who can peel away truth's protective layers. Like they have anti-gravity. They know about aliens. They're just not telling you, idiots.
So Buzz is right.
Armstrong out, and then he drops the mic. That would have been great. But
Buzz Aldrin tweeted, "We are all in danger. It is evil itself." Oh dear.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, for some reason, that wasn't on the front page of every major newspaper around the world. It was just quietly deleted. Like, he got the phone call, right? The special Buzz phone in his pocket rang, and it was like DOE.
He's like, how does this Twitter work? Okay.
Yeah.
Conference call. Hey, Buzz, we warned you. Those are lovely grandchildren that you have. Your great-grandchildren, too.
And to your point here, Ernie, he had just been evacuated from the South Pole due to health concerns.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I remember when he was down there, right? I forgot about that.
Photograph him out.
And he's posting a picture of a pyramid down there. And it could be one of those pyramids that the remote viewers at the Stanford Research Institute, Pat Price, I think, was their best remote viewer. And he went one night and remote viewed like all these alien bases. And one of them was under Mount Shasta. One of them was in Australia. And I think one of them was like near the South Pole. And it was like a pyramid using to control people's minds. Remote viewing. You can't.
I think H.P. Lovecraft was either an early asset or this guy was a prophecy monger. What?
I was going to ask you about it. You have to think about that as a writer, right? Like, if remote viewing is a real thing and those guys just sit in a room and close their eyes and try to see a place far away, based on coordinates, like, how much of artistic inspiration and a writer in the flow at a keyboard, like, how much of that, could be influenced, and an idea put into your head and put into a creative, like that could be a way that Stephen's work or my work or any of us could have ideas implanted in our, that stuff from Christopher Mellon, Slide 9, Psychotronic Weapons. You guys know about Slide 9?
No, it sounds really creepy, though.
Christopher Mellon, Slide 9. Christopher Mellon had a folder open on his website, maybe by accident, but in it was a slideshow he had presented that I think was probably top secret. And Slide 9 talks about there being psychotronic weapons in the hands of enemy forces that can, that are basically like a human remote control where you could just pause people or,
a little bit of Inception going on. Just
plant
a little seed. I mean, as it relates to Lovecraft, there's no question in my mind the enduring, and I'll completely, I'll sign on for that. The universe drops ideas on us that if you kind of open yourself up, you have no idea what might swim in, good or bad. But the enduring nature of that world that he created is just, I don't know, man. It's just the shit we're talking about now circles right back.
Oh yeah, the Eldritch Wars. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, just the unknowable, unspeakable, deep ones, and it's just, I don't know.
I used to play Lovecraft, Call of Cthulhu. How do you pronounce Cthulhu? You pronounce Cthulhu?
Cthulhu is how I pronounce. There's HP, a big candle of his head, right?
Oh yeah. I played HP Lovecraft like role playing games, like Dungeons and Dragons, but based in
Cthulhu was awesome. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if Tom wrote a novel that had H.P. Lovecraft as one of the main characters.
Oh yeah, the Arcanum.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's very good novel. You'd like it.
You've worked with like Guillermo and Frank Miller and all these guys I idolize that are the coolest. Like, you've done some cool stuff. I love Curse too. I was a fan of Curse. You worked on that, right?
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I am a huge. I hoover up anything to do with the Arthurian mythos. I love retellings of that. You ever read John Steinbeck's King Arthur book that he wrote just as like a hobby for his son?
No,
really cool.
Never even heard of it.
Chris actually reminded me of, there's a great comic book that came out in the 80s called Camelot 3000 that you might dig.
I remember the title, and I don't think I ever read.
It was like a futuristic reimagining of King Arthur mythos, but I got similar vibes. I love what you guys were doing with Kirsten, reimagining Arthurian characters.
Thank you. There's one moment where it was like really early on, because Frank and I had agreed to do it. We were talking about, because of course I worshiped Frank Miller growing up. I mean, his work was so impactful in my life, and just, you know, so I just remember driving when he sent the first kind of images of the Fae, or what the Lady of the Lake would look like, feel like. And it was just like the first sort of Frank Miller original coming through my phone. I like pulled over and had to just be like, all right, this is going to be fucking cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was really, really completely fanboy moment. And he's cool. Great. We continue to do stuff together. He's like Uncle Frank at this point.
He came here to Austin and made The Spirit, and also both Sin City movies with my friend Robert Rodriguez here in town. Mm-hmm. He bought all these when the old airport here in Austin closed and they opened the new airport. He bought up a bunch of buildings at the old airport and turned it into Austin studios. And they had like one old airplane hangar full of blue screens, and that's where they made both Sin City movies, all the Spy Kids movies, all in. I love, that's some of my favorite Frank Miller adaptations too. Is the Sin City.
I showed my son who's 20. I showed him Sin City, and he hadn't seen it. I couldn't believe it, because he knows Frank and he'd been through the whole Cursed experience. But I showed him Sin City, and the first 5 minutes he's like, "The fuck is this? Like, what is this?" And then like the next 5 minutes he's like, I'm so in, like this is fucking awesome. Like that's the effect where you're initially like, what's happening? And then you're like, you got me. It's just, it's so
and that,
pure.
That was one of those movies that was a great leap forward, you know?
Yeah, too.
Just, you know, having all your sets be not real, you know.
Not real, but also just like recreating comic book panels, you know, graphic novel panels, like frame for frame. And bringing them to life, like it was just so great. Only Robert could have made that. Those were so
it's
good.
Wild. I remember Guillermo actually was showing the early Mountains of Madness. Like, when is that going to ever happen? Do we think because this would have been 2011 or something when he was. Because it got shut down, the R-rated version that was supposed to be that Universal was going to make, and it just had all these amazing like aliens coming out of aliens you know, he was just like in full bloom, like in all of his madness. I'm still praying that he'll, and I think he'll figure it out, because that has to get Mountains of Madness has to get made at some point.
It does.
You know, where it's a story now, so that should help
Yeah, I met Guillermo waiting in line for Star Wars Episode 1 at a theater downtown. Guillermo was not waiting in line with the rest of the nerds, but he came down to visit us, and that's how I met him. And then once, when I was coming out of the airport in London, this woman came up and was so excited and took all these pictures with me, and she was speaking in a language I didn't understand, and then she went away, and the woman with me explained that she thought that I was Guillermo.
Well, you know what?
He had just won his Oscar, so I felt real famous there for a second. No.
What do you think now with, because I think if you, in terms of Hollywood, in terms of this subject matter of like UAP, because what is your take? We've talked, you mentioned that like there've been assets in the entertainment industry forever and influencing forever, because I haven't like widely tested this, but in terms of material that is purportedly true, you know, if you were going to talk about the Tic Tac story or something, as opposed to aliens invade, a fictional horror story, like a true story, I don't know. What do you feel the temperature is in the industry right now for something like that?
I don't know. Well, you already see the Tic Tac video and the Go Fast, and you already see those inserted into different Hollywood movies to set up.
Or Super Bowl ads.
Yeah. Super Bowl ads. It's already, you know, but I don't know. Like, I'm dying to do it. Like, it's a television show that I'm developing based like with George as the centerpiece. But I would imagine, like, I can't believe somebody hasn't already done the a recreation of the Nimitz encounter. And these
Yeah,
guys,
or just I'm just. Well, do you think they'll let that? I mean, so that's good, though, but that's encouraging. If that's happening, that's great, because I think in terms of like soaking into the culture, like this is a true story what we're about to share with you, because I don't really
yeah,
think that's happened.
no,
I mean, communion. I guess communion. Christopher Walken.
yeah, but even like even the films that are coming out now, like Oppenheimer, right? How much of that story is missing? Like, there's no way that guy wasn't read in on whatever
Right.
was going on with UFOs. Those guys at Los Alamos, when Enrico Fermi is coming up with the Fermi paradox, Los Alamos is being like dive bombed by UFOs every other day. And meanwhile, Enrico Fermi's like, where is everybody? Frank Drake is running his numbers. Like, it's so ridiculous to me. Like, but I guess David Grush was saying Robert Sarbacher was the one who was put in charge of standing up a lot of these early programs to deal with recovered UFOs. That apparently before even Roswell, right? They got that one from Italy. That's crazy to me that the Vatican hips the U.S. military to the fact that, oh yeah, by the way, Mussolini found some ship from somewhere before the war even started. And that they carted that back. That's great. Like, that part of the spoils of World War II was a craft from somewhere else. And where is that thing? Where is that thing they found in Italy in 1938? Like, it's not in any museum.
Yeah.
I mean, with all the bombs going off and the entire world convulsed by, chaos and violence, that something would have fallen out of the sky, especially with all the Foo Fighters reports and all of that. Like, and why wouldn't they be just checking out, like, holy shit, the aliens are like, this is it, guys. Like, they're going down.
It seems like from what, Diana Pazalka says about getting into the archives, it does seem like the Vatican has been preparing for this for a lot longer than anybody else.
Yeah. Because, like that's the other terrifying thing. Like, I was raised in the Christian church and went to Sunday school and rejected all of that when I was a teenager and assumed it was all just made up stories. People worshiping their own desire, and just no difference between religion and mythology. But now, like, I'm not so sure. I've come all the way back around to not being so sure. That it's something like what happened in the Bible. Because if the story that's depicted in the Bible is true, then that's a loosh farm. That's a soul farm. Jesus and his dad were just in the void, bored off their ass, and they're like, you know what? I would like some entertainment, some people to love me. Like, so I'm going to create a planet and create this species and set them in motion and see if they love me. And they'll give them an apple and tree and say, you can have every tree in the garden, but this one. And it's like it's a Machiavellian game. And if they're real, then Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit, they would all be three different versions or variants of some super powerful alien being. And they've set this world in motion for their own purpose and entertainment. And even if they're farming love and they're farming humans just to, it's still not a party that you can leave.
Well, there's also sort of a middle ground where, these phenomena could have been occurring and all the world's religions were just humans who would like to tell stories, filling in the gaps, just going, like, oh, well, it's like, somebody watched, St. Francis get burnt by lasers and then it was an angel and it gave him stigmata,
That's the Air Force. Yeah, I still believe that. Like, there's still people walking around the Pentagon that are like, we shouldn't be looking into this. They're demons. Like, Christopher Mellon's an asshole. He's messing with demons.
Like, and the worst part is they might be right.
Right? They could be demons. Or why not? That's the other one that I hear a lot now.
Oh, Jinn,
or different variants of different, like, fairies and elves and all these other things from human mythology. Like,
well, I mean, it's just that. I mean, one thing we know about our visual perception is that most of it isn't visual. Most of it's memory, and most of it is, gets altered over time. So So the phenomena can present itself not just either by deliberate manipulation on the part of the NHI, the non-human intelligence, or just by the way our senses work. That our senses are basically a construction inside our brains. They aren't really about, just capturing the light and getting the exact information, because most 50% of everything we see is just memory of other things we've seen.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's not, none of our perceptions are intrinsically real,
Yes, but they feel real, and we all coexist in this same consensus reality, whatever it is. And you still have to deal with it, whatever it is, whatever the nature of reality is, even if it's some quantum simulation. That that's what seems to be the implications now. Like, not only does the tree not fall in the forest if no one is there to hear it, the forest itself isn't even there.
No tree.
Yeah. Well, that's like Donald. Yeah, Donald Hoffman is definitely making the argument that that when Einstein's question, do you think the moon isn't there when you don't look at it? And Donald Hoffman is saying it's not.
Yeah,
it's not there. The moon isn't there when you don't look at it.
And if things are only there when they're perceived by a conscious entity, then that would be another reason to grow humans. I talked about this one with George and Jeremy. Like, if you were going to farm humans or grow them as containers, one of the things, because a soul, it could just be another word for consciousness, self-awareness. Or it could be like Bill Hicks says, it's just a ride. This is like being human here for a while on planet Earth is like a ride that you buy a ticket for this, and you get to go have a human life on Earth, maybe multiple times. My friend Andy Weir, who's wrote The Martian and Project Hail Mary, he's a really good science fiction writer. He wrote a really popular short story called The Egg. That has been animated and done by a lot of people, The Egg by Andy Weir. And it's basically a short story about an alien child talking to its parent, and it's learning that its life as a human being on the Earth is part of the egg, which is the way that they grow their offspring and educate them is they have to live every life of every human being who has ever lived in the history of the planet Earth. So when you finish one life, then you go on to the next life, and the way that they evolve and grow to adulthood and emerge from the egg is to live every life of every person who's ever lived on the planet Earth. So when you shoot somebody in an alley or hit somebody with a baseball bat, that's you doing that to yourself at a difference is the idea. So it could be, that's a really another appealing idea. Like when I say farm, lab, zoo, a lot of people say school. It's not a farm, lab, or a zoo. It's a school. But if it's a school, it's a school you can't leave and don't have any choice about attending. So to me, that's the same as a prison.
It makes me think of this. Just the other night, we were watching the Surviving Death, based on the Leslie Kean book. So good. And this, oh my God, this near-death experience stories. And this one woman who was, in a kayak and fell in the waterfall and was dead for 35 minutes. They were in the Patagonia. They had to drag her out. They were just doing body recovery at this point. Her friends now, they had lost her. She was blue, purple. Like, they managed to bring her back, and she wasn't miraculously brain damaged, but she had this elaborate and extended near-death experience with these beings. And I would have watched that 10 years ago with a completely different set of lenses than watching it now, because all of it circles back, of course, to this idea of whether we're in what these near-death experiences are. In fact, during the near-death experience, they told her that her son wouldn't make it past 18, and she lived with that for 10 years with her son, who then was hit by a car 2 weeks after his 18th birthday.
Wow.
And just an extraordinary story that again, like, had it happened to this woman. This woman went through the accident. She went through the thing. She went through all this. So, like, the idea of her in any way lying about this, or it defies any sense of logic. So then it just
you ask any ER doctor in any town. Like I have a guy on my street. You ask any of them, they all see it all the time.
And there's actually, I just saw this 45-minute documentary on YouTube. The YouTube channel, I think it's called Parnia Lab. It's basically it's an NYU lab, NYU's like research hospital, and it's called I think it's called Rethinking Death, and it's 45 minutes, but it's, to me it seemed like a real leap in that it was a lot of doctors, clinicians,
they're taking it seriously,
and they're no longer dismissing NDE the way everyone has up until very recently. You know, where everyone said, "Oh, it's dismissing it. It's just some sort of, it's the brain losing oxygen, it's an hallucination as you approach death." But they basically were saying that, basically they started encountering near-death experiences in the medical field as soon as they developed CPR.
Right.
Right.
As soon as you could bring people back. And then they thought, well, all right, but the brain dies after about 5 minutes. And now they found that the actual brain cells stay alive for hours after death.
This woman was dead for 35 minutes.
Yeah.
She was gone. I mean,
well, I was saying they're what they found out was they can, they found one thing, they can grow brain organoids, they call them, I guess, right? From brain cells hours after someone has died. They can take cells from the brain, and the cells aren't dead. You can grow them in a petri dish. But they've also found that they've been able to bring people back after they've been dead for over an hour. And they've actually changed the term from near-death experience. They say that's no longer shouldn't be the term for it because it's inaccurate. They said they now call it a recalled experience of death. Because their attitude now is these aren't near-death experiences. These are people who were thoroughly dead.
Yeah,
they had passed all the way over. They weren't in an in-between state. They were through the gray zone into dead.
And this
and then they've been brought back to life.
And this idea that a brain deprived of oxygen can organize a consensus fantasy shared by, how many thousands, millions of others who've had the same experience, that just a brain deprived of oxygen isn't completely freaking out and aggressive and insane and shutting down, or as opposed to like, I'm going to put this story together, this very sort of visual controlled, and defies.
And they tell detailed stories of events that they couldn't possibly have witnessed.
Right,
things that happen in other rooms. Well, they're dead.
Yeah. John Alexander had a great one where it was a guy in a helicopter in Vietnam had an out-of-body experience, died on the ground, and floated up above the jungle canopy, and then saw the LZ zone where they needed to get to escape, to get evac, and then got resuscitated back on the ground. They got into a helicopter, went up, and he told them where to go. Because he had already floated up and directed them. Like, it's one of the only times that anybody had like been in a helicopter, an air vehicle, and taken the same path that their body took. Crazy,
awesome.
Like that. But it happens again and again. Like the implication being like, when you die, you get knocked out of your body and find out like that it was just a car you were driving. Your soul or your consciousness was driving this whole time, and that your consciousness can exist free of the meat puppet. It
seems like it is the norm, that this is the norm of what happens when you die, and it just seems to be that it's this, maybe there's a small minority of people that don't recall it. But most people seem to recall it,
and some people remember, especially all those stories of young kids who remember elements of their previous life, which again could not have been confirmed until the existence of the internet. When some kid starts telling a story about being a World War II pilot or something, like until the dad is able to go and like Google it and like check details and find out, oh shit, this guy knows the names of my kid who's 5 years old knows the names of other crew members on this ship and the details of this. Did you see that? That was one in Leslie Keene's show. The kid from Hollywood book, the kid from Hollywood who found the whole.
Yeah, he was a swinging talent agent.
That was crazy, and that pictures me. Like, so some people get to take the ride more than once.
Which of course that's also could be evidence that Nick Bostrom's right about the simulation. Yeah, because one of the things he said, well, if it is a simulation, then there will be glitches, And someone asked, well, what would you think would be a glitch? And he said, well, reincarnation would be one, because if it's a simulation, and which I'd thought about too, if it's a simulation, there has to be data compression. There has to be, because otherwise you're creating an entire universe and there's no point to it.
Right.
So it has to be smaller than a universe. So you have to compress the data. So you would create, conscious entities to be the agents within your program that you want to test a hypothesis in. And then once you've run the program, you'd reuse them.
Yeah.
You'd wipe the memory and reuse them, but maybe sometimes the memory doesn't get wiped.
Right. Clearly it doesn't. And sometimes people remember details, or if they have their near-death experience and then remember details of the afterlife. There are so many, there are YouTube channels, and there was a great documentary that just came out. There's all just interviews with people about their near-death experiences. There was one that is my favorite. This guy, I think, has the most views of anyone on YouTube. A guy who was an EMT and got sick and had a near-death experience. And he saw, as the only time I ever heard anybody say this, he saw little dwarf-like hooded characters that he described to somebody, and they said, go watch Communion, the movie of Communion. And he saw the movie of Communion and was shocked to see that they looked just like those hooded dwarf figures that you see in the movie Communion that Whitley described seeing. So that's a fascinating connection between what happened to Whitley and the UFO phenomenon and near-death experiences. That's one of the things that link the two. I will send you guys that.
I was going to say, but another interesting thing though is that with people who recall past lives, they generally it occurs in childhood and fades over time,
right?
Which to me also sounds like data correction,
right? Or there's it's weird because you still remember your past life, but it's during the time before you acquire language. So and then it starts to fade right around that time. So it's not as big of a problem, and nobody takes anything a kid says seriously.
Right?
They assume imagination. But I've heard people, once they have near-death experiences or reincarnation experiences, that they start asking little kids, do you remember when you were big? Like, it's a question to ask little kids who are 3 or 4. Do you remember?
That's interesting.
I don't know. I think we confuse the hell out of a lot of kids or scare them. But it's a wild thing to think that after you struggle with the existential dilemma, you have to go again.
Well, my question, and one of the, and we can, and as we've kept you a while, so I always end with like some DMT questions, because I wonder if this is a replicable experience. Is the near-death experience, can it be replicated? I will not be partaking myself because my consciousness can't. I'm not emotionally.
You're a writer. That's your work machine.
Very fragile. Yeah, I'm just not my game anymore.
Didn't do Huxley any harm.
Right. No, I have. I just heard that they were doing the first study of that over in England, where they were like jacking people up with DMT, giving them a dose, like keeping them in there for hours.
Yeah, the IV move, right?
Yeah.
To map
Talk about heroic. Those guys who signed up for that. Yeah, sign me up for the system.
Well, it's like what I guess Paul Hynek was talking to us about, the fact that there's even a group of scientists who are, because the DMT experience seems so uniform in a way, that they think they can map the space where the experience exists.
Yeah,
they think they have enough data. They have enough data points from people that they think they can basically draw a map. Of the landscape.
They're all
meeting. What an exciting time.
They're all meeting the same
old curse, like, may you live in interesting times. We live in the most interesting times ever.
I know. I warn my kids. It's like, hang on, it's gonna be interesting.
And for me, it's like all the atheist beliefs that I was so content with are all crumbling around me.
Yeah.
I still don't think there's a God or a religion behind it all, but clearly it seems like there's a really good chance that death isn't death, and that there is something similar to gods functioning around us all the time.
Yeah,
It's getting funky.
One thing a lot of those people with the near-death experiences say is that they feel like an overwhelming sense of love and the best they've ever felt, and it's like 1,000% upgrade, and that they don't want to go back, and that they're always deeply disappointed. And some people who have to go back are like, "Fuck," like never get over it because it was so awesome for a few seconds. But and also like learn to not talk about that. People don't want to hear about your near-death experience or how you went to some beautiful place and felt total love and it was fantastic. But then you that's not stuff you want to share at the water cooler because it's bringing everybody down. It's Wednesday. They don't.
Yeah.
Or your abduction experience. Yes.
Yeah.
Or your.
I like it. It's like if you're English and then for one shining moment you get to be Italian.
Right. And then
and then you got to go back to being English,
to being part of the British Empire again.
Perfect analogy.
But no, I'm fascinated by all of it. It's so exciting to see science and scientists, maybe because now they have permission, sort of, to start take tentative steps into all of these things that used to be the realm of the Ghostbusters, right? It was just the paranormal and the science and parapsychology, not taken seriously by science until 2024. We had to wait for this crazy science fiction year to roll around, and science finally starts to take it seriously when science fiction writers were already taking it.
I know, right? Yeah,
and
it's kicked into another gear.
Yeah, and all of these worlds are colliding and overlapping and interweaving,
and you guys are one of the few people. There's just a handful of people, maybe 20 in the whole world, who are focusing on this, and very few people in the entertainment industry or Hollywood who have the chutzpah and the individuality to I don't care what the rest of you believe or who the rest of you guys can't wrap your head around it. But I'm paying attention and I'm taking it seriously, and you guys are two of those people. I'm so grateful for you two and Bryce and Ross and George and Jeremy. You're like my three news outlets.
Yeah,
is you guys?
You know who else is really serious about it too? Is Michael Ian Black from the
I saw him speaking up too. But that's again, how many people? You can count them on one hand.
Yeah, and I'm sure the rest of the state guys think he's crazy, just like the rest of the kids in the hall think I'm crazy.
Oh man, it just breaks my heart that you're the only one, Dave. That I would kill for just the kids only UFO paranormal.
Yeah, we're gonna get them all on.
I will think Scott
can't
Thompson,
handle it. I can't handle it.
Scott Thompson believes in it. Too.
Yeah, Scott.
But he believes it's all here just for him. But I think I think there's a fairly good chance that Scott might have had an abduction experience when he was in early adolescence.
Wow. He was in a school shooting too. Scott, he was in a school shooting too, right?
He was, one of the first big ones, in Brampton.
Yeah, Scott's seen some things.
Yeah, no, and he had a weird encounter that involved that I kept telling him. Said, well, those what you're describing are common screen experiences for abductees, and he's talking like encountering talking animals and and these entities in the woods.
Oh my God! Now I would love to hear this. I hope you can get him on, Scott. If you're watching, man, I would love to hear those stories. That's amazing. He has nothing to fear. That guy's fearless.
No, he doesn't. Well, he's certainly not worried about ridicule.
He's the man.
He wouldn't be a kid in the hall if he was worried about ridicule, because 90% of our time is spent ridiculing him.
Yeah, but it didn't matter. Man, Buddy Coyle, those Buddy Coyle monologues, groundbreaking. That guy, just I got. You guys are here in my DVD collection. I got kids.
There we go.
There we go.
Yay.
Oh, yeah. I still put those on. That's like my comfort viewing. I tried when Dave and I were hanging out. I tried not to geek out on him too much, but
and vice versa.
And I try to keep it together myself. But Ernie, listen, let's keep this conversation going.
Yes,
I learned a ton. And mutual hats off to you and research and the work that you're doing and the stories you're telling. What's next? What's coming out next? Or what do you like?
Well, I have my first middle grade fiction book, which is like a covert subterfuge way for me to talk about UFOs. But it's coming out in about a month, April 4th, or excuse me, April 8th, the same day as the eclipse. We're having an eclipse down here in Austin. If you guys want to come down.
Yeah.
But it's called Bridge to Bat City, and it's a middle grade fiction. It's kind of, I grew up loving Roald Dahl and Fantastic Mr. Fox and James the Giant Peach, and it's that kind of thing. But it's about the bats here in Austin. We have the largest urban bat colony in the world here in Austin, living under a bridge down by the state capitol. And so it's like a children's story based on that. But you should come down. You guys should come down, see the eclipse, see the bats.
I love it.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Right
Ernest
on.
Cline, sir, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Fun. Thank you, guys.
Let's do it again soon, and we really, really appreciate it. And yeah, man, can't wait to do this again.
Right on. I'm around. Give me a shout.
All right, great. Thanks, Ernie, so much.
Thank
Good
you
to
guys.
see you.
Thanks, Ernie.